Cathara stepped off the transport ship and breathed in the thin air of Kepler 442c. The gravity here was lighter than home, making each step feel strange and bouncy. Around the landing pad, human soldiers moved like busy insects, carrying boxes and checking weapons. Their movements seemed so rushed and chaotic compared to the ordered precision of Vorthak military operations. The Vorthak warrior stood 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin that could stop most projectile weapons. 4 arms made carrying equipment. Easy and enhanced vision could spot enemies from great distances. Cathara had fought in 12 major battles across the galaxy and earned respect from even the highest military commanders. Being sent to observe these new humans felt like an insult. "You must be our Vorthak observer," said a voice behind Cathara. The alien turned to see a human approaching. The creature was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair and eyes. Its skin looked so thin that Cathara wondered how it could survive in any combat situation. The human wore simple green clothing with metal tags that said Lee June and showed captain rank symbols. "I am Cathara of the 3rd Vorthak Fleet," the alien replied in careful galactic common language. "I am here to watch and report on human military capabilities." Captain Lee June smiled, showing white teeth. This expression puzzled Cathara. On most worlds, showing teeth was a threat display. "Welcome to Forward Base Echo. We're honored to have such an experienced warrior with us." As they walked through the base, Cathara noticed how different everything was from proper military installations. Human soldiers sat in small groups, talking and laughing loudly. Some were cleaning weapons, but they did it while joking with each other. Others played card games or shared food. The noise level would have been unacceptable in any serious military. "Camp. Your soldiers seem very relaxed," Cathara observed. "Do they understand they will face the Hivemar tomorrow?" Captain Lee nodded. "Oh yes, they know. This is how humans prepare for battle. We call it keeping morale up." Cathara had read about human morale in the briefing files. It seemed to be some kind of emotional state that affected combat performance. Most advanced species had moved beyond such primitive psychological dependencies long ago. Vorthak warriors relied on training, equipment, and logical tactical analysis. They reached a large tent where more humans gathered around a holographic display. The projection showed a detailed map of the target area. A Hivemar stronghold built into the mountainside. Red dots marked known enemy positions, while blue lines showed planned attack routes. "Sergeant Park Dan, front and center," Captain Lee called out. A stocky human with broad shoulders stepped forward. His hands were stained with what looked like explosive residue. "Yes, sir, Captain." "Tell our observer about tomorrow's demolition plan." Park Dan grinned and pointed at the hologram. "See these tunnel entrances? We're going to blow them shut with shaped charges, cut off their reinforcement routes before they know what hit them." Cathara studied the plan with growing concern. "This requires soldiers to get very close to heavily defended positions. Many will die." "Probably," Park Dan agreed cheerfully. "But that's the job." The casual way the human talked about death shocked Cathara. Either these creatures had no understanding of their own mortality, or they simply didn't care. Both possibilities seemed equally disturbing. A female human approached the group. She was smaller than the others, with kind eyes and gentle movements. "Captain Lee, is this our Vorthak friend?" "Dr. Kim Yuri, meet Cathara. She's our xenobiologist and translator." Dr. Kim bowed slightly, which Cathara recognized as a human respect gesture. I've studied Vorthak culture extensively. Your military traditions are fascinating. At least someone here takes warfare seriously, Kethara muttered. Dr. Kim laughed, softly. Oh, we take it very seriously. We just show it differently than your people do. Before Kethara could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the base. Soldiers immediately stopped their casual activities and moved with sudden purpose. The transformation was remarkable. One moment they were joking and playing, the next, they were checking weapons and gathering equipment with practiced efficiency. Incoming. Intelligence report, announced a voice over the communication system. HFY activity increasing in Sector 7. All units prepare for possible early deployment. Captain Lee's expression became serious as he listened to updates through his communication device. Change of plans, people. We move out in 2 hours instead of tomorrow morning. The humans around Kethara began preparing for battle with impressive speed. But what struck the Vorthak observer most was that they continued talking and even joking while they worked. How could they maintain such casual behavior when facing potential death? Don't they understand the danger? Kethara asked Dr. Kim. They understand it better than you might think, she replied while checking her medical supplies. Humans developed on a world where almost everything tried to kill us. We learned long ago that fear and worry don't help survival. Sometimes humor is the only thing that keeps us sane. Kethara watched as Sergeant Park Dan tested his explosive devices. The human's hands were steady, his movements precise. There was no fear in his actions, only focused concentration. Maybe these creatures were braver than they appeared. A young human soldier walked past, and Kethara noticed his hands shaking slightly. This one at least showed proper concern about the coming battle. The soldier couldn't be more than 20 standard years old, barely an adult by most species standards. First time in major combat? Kethara asked. The young human looked up. His name tag read Choi Wan. Yes, sir. Yes, Kethara, sir. I'm not sure how to address Vorthak warriors. You may call me Observer. What is your role in tomorrow's mission? Sniper support, Choi Wan replied. I'm supposed to provide covering. Fire during the assault. Despite his obvious nervousness, the young human was checking his rifle with careful attention to detail. His movements showed extensive training, even if his emotions showed inexperience. Are you afraid? Kethara asked directly. Choi Wan considered the question seriously. Yes, I am. But Sergeant Park says being scared just means you're smart enough to understand the situation. The trick is not letting it stop you from doing your job. This answer surprised Kethara. Most species tried to eliminate fear through training or chemical enhancement. These humans seemed to accept it as natural, as the base prepared for early deployment. Kethara began to wonder if the reports about human military capabilities were accurate. They certainly didn't act like any soldiers the Vorthak had ever encountered. Whether that made them better or worse remained to be seen. The real test would come tomorrow when they faced the HFY in actual combat. The human forward base came alive in the early morning hours. Kethara had spent the night in a specially built shelter, but sleep had been difficult. The humans made noise throughout the night, some talking quietly, others moving around checking equipment. In Vorthak military culture, the night before battle was spent in silent meditation and mental preparation. When dawn broke over the rocky landscape, Kethara emerged to find the humans already busy with final preparations. The casual atmosphere from yesterday had changed, but not in the way the Vorthak observer expected. Instead of grim silence, there was focused energy mixed with continued conversation. "Morning, Observer," called Captain Lee June as he approached. "Ready to see humans in action?" "I am prepared to document your performance," Cathara replied formally. Captain Lee studied the alien's expression. "You still think we're going to fail, don't you?" Cathara considered lying diplomatically, then decided on honesty. "Your soldiers show poor discipline and little understanding of proper military protocol. They treat serious matters like games." "Interesting perspective," Captain Lee said. "Dr. Kim wanted to speak with you before we head out. She thinks it might help you understand us better." They found Dr. Kim Yuri near the medical station, organizing supplies with Corporal Yang Bin, the unit medic. Yang Bin was a quiet man with steady hands and calm eyes. He moved with the same casual confidence that seemed common among all the humans. "Cathara," Dr. Kim greeted. "I wanted to explain something about human military psychology before you make your final judgments." "I am listening," the Vorthak replied. "Your people developed on a world with few natural predators, correct?" Vorthak evolution was relatively peaceful. This is accurate. Our homeworld had abundant resources and little environmental danger, Dr. Kim nodded. Humans evolved very differently. Our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, food shortages. Everything was a threat. We survived by learning to work together under extreme stress. Corporal Yang Bin looked up from his medical supplies. "What she's trying to say is that we're naturally anxious creatures. Our brains are wired to expect danger." "But you seem so relaxed," Cathara protested. "We've learned to manage the anxiety," Dr. Kim explained. "Humor, conversation, shared activities, these help us stay functional when we're scared. And we're almost always scared, at least a little bit." This revelation surprised Cathara. "You admit to constant fear?" "Fear keeps us alive," Yang Bin said simply. "It makes us careful, makes us watch each other's backs. A human who isn't afraid is usually a dead human." Before Cathara could respond, Commander Sohei approached their group. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and intense eyes. Her uniform showed the rank of Tactical Coordinator. "All teams, report ready," she announced to Captain Lee. "Transport leaves in 15 minutes." As they moved toward the waiting vehicles, Cathara noticed something interesting. The humans were checking each other's equipment, not just their own. Soldiers adjusted straps on their teammates' gear, verified ammunition counts for others, and shared last-minute reminders about mission details. "Why do they do this?" Cathara asked Dr. Kim. "Pack bonding," she replied. "Humans are social creatures. We literally cannot function well in isolation. Taking care of each other isn't just kindness, it's survival instinct." Private Choi 1 was sitting alone, staring at his rifle. His hands weren't shaking anymore, but Cathara could see tension in his shoulders. Several older soldiers noticed too. Sergeant Park Dan sat down beside the young sniper. "First mission nerves?" "I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong," Choi Wan admitted. "Good," Park Dan said. "Means your brain is working. You've trained for this, right?" "Yes, Sergeant. Hundreds of hours on the range, tactical, simulations, everything. Then trust your training. Trust your team. We've got your back and you've got ours." An older soldier named Private Nam Gill joined them. "Want to know a secret? I've been doing this for 8 years and I still get nervous before missions." "Really?" Choi Wan asked. "Really. The day I stop being nervous is the day I get careless. Nervous keeps you sharp." Cathara watched this interaction with growing confusion. In Vorthak culture, showing weakness or uncertainty was shameful. Commanders would remove nervous soldiers from missions to protect unit effectiveness. But these humans seemed to view anxiety as normal and even helpful. "Your military accepts fearful soldiers?" Cathara asked Commander Sohai. "We don't accept fearful soldiers," she replied. "We require them. A soldier who claims to feel no fear is either lying or broken. Fear is information. It tells us to be careful, to think ahead, to protect each other." The transport vehicles were large, armored machines that could carry 20 soldiers each. As the teams loaded their equipment, Cathara noticed more examples of the human pack-bonding behavior. Soldiers helped each other climb into the vehicles, shared water and food, and continued their constant communication. During the ride toward the target zone, the humans maintained their pattern of mixing seriousness with conversation. They reviewed mission objectives while also sharing stories about home. They checked weapons while making jokes about previous battles. "This seems like poor mental preparation," Cathara commented to Dr. Kim. "Actually, it's excellent mental preparation," she replied. "Humans need social connection to function optimally. Cutting ourselves off from each other would make us weaker, not stronger." Through the vehicle's windows, Cathara could see the target area approaching. The Hivemar stronghold was built into a mountain face, with multiple tunnel entrances visible, even from a distance. Intelligence reports indicated hundreds of enemy soldiers inside, along with unknown biological weapons. The humans grew quieter as they got closer, but they didn't become silent. Instead, their conversations shifted to tactical details and equipment checks. The change was subtle but noticeable. "Final weapons check," called Captain Lee. "Remember, we go in fast and hard. Demolition team takes out the tunnels. Sniper team provides overwatch. Assault teams clear the main entrances." "What about casualties?" asked Corporal Yang Bin. "We bring everyone home," Captain Lee replied firmly. "Everyone." This surprised Cathara. Vorthak military doctrine accepted calculated losses as part of tactical planning. Promising zero casualties seemed unrealistic and potentially dangerous to mission success. "You cannot guarantee such an outcome," Cathara pointed out. "Maybe not," Captain Lee admitted, "but that's always our goal. Humans don't leave their people behind." The transport vehicles stopped at the staging area, still several kilometers from the target. As the soldiers prepared to advance on foot, Cathara noticed the final transformation in their behavior. The casual conversation continued, but now it was mixed with focused concentration and systematic preparation. Sergeant Park Dan was loading explosive charges into his pack with practiced efficiency. His movements were precise and confident, showing no trace of the fear that Dr. Kim claimed all humans carried. "Are you not afraid?" Cathara asked him directly. Park Dan paused and looked at the alien observer. "Terrified," he said cheerfully, "but that's what makes it interesting." As the human force began their advance toward the Hivemar stronghold, Cathara realized that everything the Galactic Council believed about these creatures might be wrong. They weren't fearless or reckless. They were something much more complex and potentially much more dangerous. The real test was about to begin. The first sign of enemy contact came as a whistling sound overhead. Cathara's enhanced hearing picked up the projectile before the humans could react, and the Vorthak warrior automatically began calculating retreat routes according to standard military doctrine. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they immediately spread out into defensive positions and began moving forward. Captain Lee Jun spoke quietly into his communication device while his soldiers advanced toward the source of the incoming fire. "Contact front, estimated 20 Hivemar acid spitters. reported Private Nam Gill from his position behind a rocky outcrop. Range 400 meters. Cathara expected the humans to call for heavy weapons support or request tactical bombardment from orbit. These were standard responses when facing Hivemar forces. Instead, Captain Lee made a decision that defied all military logic. Demolition team, advance to primary targets. Sniper team, provide covering fire. Assault teams, prepare to breach on my signal. You're ordering them to move closer to the enemy? Cathara asked in disbelief. That's how we do things, Captain Lee replied calmly. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Sergeant Park Dan was already running toward the Hivemar positions, carrying his pack full of explosive charges. The enemy immediately focused their fire on him, sending streams of acid that could melt through most armor in seconds. Instead of seeking cover, Park Dan used the rocky terrain to his advantage, jumping between boulders and using natural formations to block enemy sight lines. Is he trying to get killed? Cathara wondered aloud. He's trying to complete his mission, Dr. Kim Yuri replied. She was following close behind the assault teams with her medical supplies, apparently unconcerned about the acid fire passing overhead. From his elevated position, Private Choi Wan began picking off Hivemar soldiers with careful, precise shots. Each time his rifle fired, an enemy position went silent. The young sniper's nervousness from yesterday had been replaced by focused concentration. Cathara watched in amazement as the human tactics unfolded. Instead of the careful, methodical approach that most military forces used against the Hivemar, the humans were improvising constantly. When acid fire blocked one route, they found another. When enemy positions proved too well defended, they created distractions to draw attention elsewhere. The first real shock came when Corporal Yang Bin ran directly into enemy fire to reach a wounded Vorthak soldier from another unit. The medic ignored the acid streams burning the ground around him and dragged the injured alien to safety behind a boulder. Why did he do that? Cathara demanded. Standard protocol says to wait for covering fire before attempting rescue operations. Because someone needed help, Yang Bin replied simply as he worked on the wounded Vorthak. We don't leave people behind, remember? This behavior made no tactical sense to Cathara. The medic had risked his life and potentially compromised the mission to save a single soldier who wasn't even human. In Vorthak military thinking, such actions were classified as emotional decisions that weakened overall force effectiveness. But as the battle continued, Cathara began to notice something strange. The humans' apparently reckless behavior was actually working. Sergeant Park Dan reached his target and planted explosive charges on the first tunnel entrance. The explosion sent rocks tumbling down to block the passage, cutting off Hivemar reinforcements just as planned. First tunnel sealed, Park Dan reported over the communication channel. Moving to target 2. The second tunnel was more heavily defended. Hivemar soldiers had set up overlapping fields of fire that made direct approach nearly impossible. Any sane military force would call for artillery support or wait for additional troops. Instead, Commander Sohei coordinated a complex maneuver that seemed completely insane. She ordered half the assault team to create a noisy distraction at the main entrance while Park Dan approached the second tunnel from an unexpected angle. This is suicide, Cathara muttered, but Dr. Kim just smiled. The distraction worked perfectly. Hivemar forces focused their attention on the obvious threat, while Park Dan slipped past their defenses. Within minutes, the second tunnel entrance exploded in a shower of rock and debris. How did they know that would work? Cathara asked. Experience, Commander Sohei replied. Humans have been fighting impossible odds for our entire species' history. We've gotten good at it. The main assault began with Private Choi Wan providing sniper support from his rocky perch. Each shot eliminated a Hivemar defender, clearing the way for the ground teams to advance. The young soldier's earlier nervousness had completely disappeared, replaced by cold precision. Captain Lee led his team directly toward the main entrance, using hand signals to coordinate their movement. The humans flowed around obstacles like water, adapting to each new threat without losing momentum. When they reached the entrance, Kethara expected them to pause and plan their next move. Instead, they immediately entered the tunnels without hesitation. The Vorthak observer had no choice but to follow, though every instinct screamed that this was a trap. Inside the Hivemar stronghold, the advantages of human psychology became even more apparent. The tunnels were dark, cramped, and filled with unknown dangers. Most species found such environments psychologically challenging. But the humans seemed completely comfortable in the confined space. Humans evolved in caves, Dr. Kim explained quietly as they moved through the passages. We're naturally adapted to this kind of environment. The team moved with surprising coordination through the tunnel system. Each soldier seemed to know exactly where the others were without constant communication. When they encountered Hivemar defenders, their response was immediate and effective. What impressed Kethara most was how the humans adapted to unexpected situations. When acid fire blocked a passage, they found alternate routes. When enemy positions proved too strong for direct assault, they used creative tactics to outflank them. During one particularly intense firefight, Private Nam Gil was wounded by acid splash. Instead of slowing down the team, Corporal Yang Bin treated the injury while the battle continued around them. The wounded soldier was back in action within minutes, though Kethara could see pain in his movements. Should he not be evacuated? Kethara asked. Not unless he asks to be, Yang Bin replied. Humans decide for themselves when they're too hurt to fight. This casual attitude toward injury seemed reckless to Kethara, but it was clearly effective. The wounded soldier continued to perform his duties, and the team maintained its momentum. As they pushed deeper into the stronghold, Kethara began to understand what made human tactics so effective. They weren't fearless. If anything, they seemed more afraid than most species would be in similar situations. But they had learned to use that fear as a tool. Fear made them careful about checking corners and watching for ambushes. Fear made them look out for each other constantly. Fear made them creative in finding solutions to tactical problems. Most importantly, fear made them absolutely determined to complete their mission and bring everyone home safely. When they reached the central chamber of the Hivemar stronghold, Kethara realized that the humans had achieved something that most military analysts considered impossible. They had assaulted a heavily defended position with minimal casualties and maximum effectiveness. But the real test was still ahead. The deepest parts of the stronghold held secrets that would challenge everything Kethara thought about courage and fear. The central chamber of the Hivemar stronghold was larger than expected, with walls that seemed to pulse with organic growth. Strange biosynthetic equipment lined the room, producing an unpleasant humming sound that made Kethara's skin crawl. The air itself felt wrong somehow, thick with chemical scents that triggered ancient survival instincts. "What is this place?" Captain Lee Jun asked, his voice carrying a note of concern that Kethara had not heard before. Dr. Kim Yuri was scanning. The area with her scientific instruments and her readings made her face go pale. "It's some kind of biological weapons laboratory, but this equipment is far more advanced than anything in our intelligence reports." Commander So-hei was studying the organic machinery with growing alarm. "These biosynthetic units are producing Something. Look at the output tubes. They're feeding into the ventilation system. Sergeant Park Dan approached one of the larger devices, explosive charges ready. Should I blow it? Wait, Dr. Kim called out. We need to understand what they're making first. If we destroy it the wrong way, we might release whatever they've created. As the team spread out to investigate the laboratory, Cathara noticed something disturbing in the air. A faint mist was seeping from the ventilation systems, carrying a sweet smell that reminded the Vorthak warrior of rotting flowers. Other alien team members from different species were also present. They had been part of the larger assault force. Within minutes, Cathara began to feel strange. The Vorthak warrior's normally steady hands started shaking slightly. Thoughts became harder to focus. Most disturbing of all, a growing sense of panic began rising from somewhere deep inside. Something is wrong, Cathara announced, trying to keep voice steady. Dr. Kim immediately began scanning the affected aliens with her medical devices. The atmospheric readings are showing unknown biological agents. Some kind of neurotoxin specifically designed to affect non-human brain chemistry. The other alien soldiers were showing similar symptoms. A Centauri captain was breathing rapidly and seemed unable to stand still. Two Corvan warriors, normally fearless in battle, were backing toward the exits with obvious terror in their eyes, but the humans appeared completely unaffected. "Why aren't you sick?" Cathara demanded, fighting against the rising panic that threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Human brain chemistry must be different enough that the weapon doesn't work on us, Dr. Kim explained while running more scans. This appears to be a targeted biological weapon designed specifically for galactic, species that aren't human. As the neurotoxin continued to affect the alien team members, Cathara experienced something that no amount of Vorthak military training had prepared for. True, complete, overwhelming fear. Not the careful concern that helped with tactical planning, or the healthy respect for danger that kept soldiers alive. This was primal terror that made thinking impossible and turned legs to liquid. Every shadow seemed to hide enemies. Every sound suggested immediate death. The urge to run became almost impossible to resist. "I cannot function," Cathara gasped, leaning against a wall for support. "It's okay," Corporal Yangbin said gently. "We'll get you out of here." "No," Captain Lee announced firmly. "We complete the mission first. We can't leave this laboratory intact." Cathara stared at the human captain in disbelief. "Your alien allies are incapacitated. Standard military protocol requires immediate evacuation." "Standard protocol doesn't account for humans," Commander So Hai replied. "We adapt to the situation." What happened next defied everything Cathara understood about military logic. Instead of evacuating the affected aliens or abandoning the mission, the humans made an impossible decision. They would complete the mission while simultaneously protecting and evacuating their incapacitated allies. Captain Lee began issuing orders that seemed tactically insane. "Demolition team will destroy the laboratory equipment. Assault teams will clear our exit route. Medical team will evacuate affected personnel. Everyone else provides security." "You cannot do all of these things at once," Cathara protested through the fog of chemically induced terror. "Watch us," Sergeant Park Dan said, with a grin that was equal parts confidence and fear. The humans split into smaller teams and began executing their impossible plan. Sergeant Park began placing explosive charges throughout the laboratory while Private Choi Wan and Private Nam Gil established defensive positions at the exits. Corporal Yang Bin and Dr. Kim started treating the affected aliens using portable, breathing apparatus to filter the contaminated air. But their treatment was limited. The neurotoxin was already in the aliens' bloodstreams. "We need to get them outside," Yang Bin reported. "The effects should wear off once they're away from the source." "Understood," Captain Lee replied. "We'll carry them out." Cathara watched in amazement as the humans prepared to literally carry their alien allies to safety while fighting their way out of an enemy stronghold. It was the kind of tactical decision that would be used in military academies as an example of what not to do. But as the evacuation began, Cathara started to understand something profound about human nature. The same fear that was paralyzing the alien soldiers was driving the humans to extraordinary acts of courage. Private Choi Won, who had been nervous about his first major battle just hours earlier, was now calmly picking off Hivemar reinforcements while his teammates evacuated the wounded. The young sniper's movements were precise and confident, showing no trace of the anxiety he had displayed before. "Why aren't you afraid?" Cathara asked him during a brief pause in the fighting. "I'm terrified," Choi Won replied, without taking his eyes off his rifle scope. "But my friends need me to do my job, so that's what I'm doing." Commander So Hei was coordinating the evacuation, while simultaneously calling in support from the orbital fleet. Her voice remained calm and professional, even as Hivemar forces began mounting counterattacks from multiple directions. "All teams, this is command. We have incoming enemy reinforcements from sectors 3 and 7. Extraction window closes in 15 minutes. Sergeant Park Dan finished placing his charges and began helping carry the affected aliens toward the exit. Despite his heavy equipment and the additional weight of an unconscious Zentari officer, he moved with steady determination. "Charges set for remote detonation," he reported. "We can blow this place once everyone's clear." As they fought their way out of the stronghold, Cathara was carried by 2 human soldiers who seemed completely unbothered by the additional burden. Even while supporting the weight of a 7-foot-tall Vorthak warrior, they maintained their defensive positions and returned fire when necessary. The exit from the stronghold was even more chaotic than the entry had been. Hivemar forces had rallied and were throwing everything they had at the retreating humans. Acid fire filled the air, and biomechanical weapons fired explosive projectiles that shook the entire mountain. But the humans never wavered. They adapted to each new threat with the same calm efficiency they had shown throughout the mission. When one exit route was blocked, they found another. When enemy fire became too intense, they created diversions and smoke screens. Most remarkably, they never considered abandoning their alien allies, even though carrying the incapacitated soldiers made their own escape much more dangerous. "Why do you do this?" Cathara managed to ask Corporal Yang Bin as they reached the relative safety of the outer perimeter. "Because that's what humans do," Yang Bin replied simply. "We take care of each other." As the explosive charges detonated behind them, destroying the Hivemar biological weapons laboratory, Cathara realized that everything the galactic community believed about fear and courage was wrong. The humans weren't brave because they felt no fear. They were brave because they felt fear and chose to act anyway. The transport ship lifted off from Kepler 442c as the last explosions echoed across the mountain range. Through the window, Cathara could see the smoking remains of the Hivemar stronghold, now nothing more than collapsed tunnels and scattered rubble. The biological weapons laboratory was completely destroyed, its dangerous secrets reduced to ash and debris. As the neurotoxin gradually cleared from the Vorthak warrior system, Normal thought processes slowly returned. The overwhelming terror that had made thinking impossible began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of confusion and curiosity. Dr. Kim Yuri was moving between the recovering alien soldiers, checking their vital signs and monitoring their recovery. Her gentle efficiency reminded Kethara of the way she had calmly worked throughout the entire mission, even when surrounded by deadly enemies. "How do you feel?" Dr. Kim asked as she scanned Kethara with her medical instruments. "Better," Kethara replied honestly, "but also confused. What I experienced in that laboratory, I have never felt anything like it before." "Complete terror," Dr. Kim said simply. "Most species never experience it because your evolution didn't require it. Humans live with a version of that feeling every day." Captain Lee Jun approached their conversation, looking exhausted but satisfied. His uniform was torn and stained, and Kethara could see small wounds on his hands and face. For the first time since meeting him, the human captain showed signs of the stress he had been carrying. "Is everyone accounted for?" Captain Lee asked. "All alien personnel are recovering normally," Dr. Kim reported. "The humans came through without serious injuries. Sergeant Park has some minor acid burns, and Private Nam still has that shoulder wound, but everyone will be fine." Kethara studied Captain Lee's face carefully. "You were afraid too, weren't you?" The human captain considered the question seriously. "Every moment of the mission. When we first saw that laboratory, when the neurotoxin started affecting our allies, when we realized we had to fight our way out while carrying wounded soldiers. I was terrified the entire time. But you never showed it. I couldn't afford to. My people needed me to stay focused and make good decisions. Fear is personal. Leadership is about what you do despite the fear." This revelation was perhaps the most shocking thing Kethara had learned during the entire mission. The calm, confident human who had led them through impossible odds had been just as afraid as everyone else. The difference was that he had used that fear as fuel rather than letting it paralyze him. Sergeant Park Dan joined their group, his hands freshly bandaged from the acid burns. Despite his injuries, he seemed cheerful and relaxed. "Great mission, everyone. That laboratory won't be bothering anyone ever again." "Were you not concerned about the danger?" Kethara asked him. "Absolutely," Park Dan replied. "I was worried about the explosives not working properly, worried about enemy reinforcements, worried about getting everyone out safely. Worry keeps you sharp, makes you double-check everything." Private Choi Wan walked past, disassembling his sniper rifle with practiced efficiency. The young soldier who had been so nervous yesterday now moved with quiet confidence. Kethara called out to him. "You performed exceptionally well for your first major combat mission." Choi Wan looked up with surprise. "Thank you, Observer. I was scared the whole time, but everyone else was counting on me to do my job properly." "The fear did not interfere with your performance?" "Actually, it helped. Fear made me more careful with each shot, more aware of my surroundings." Sergeant Park was right. Being scared just means you understand the situation. As the transport ship traveled back toward the main fleet, Kethara spent time talking with each of the human soldiers. What emerged from these conversations was a completely different understanding of how fear and courage actually worked. Commander. Sohei explained how fear helped with tactical planning. When you're afraid, you think about all the things that could go wrong. That makes you prepare better backup plans and safety measures. Corporal Yang Bin described how fear strengthened unit bonding. When everyone is scared, you look out for each other more carefully. Fear makes us protective of our teammates. Dr. Kim provided the scientific perspective. Human brains evolved to use fear as a survival tool. It heightens awareness, improves reaction times, and motivates protective behavior. Most species try to eliminate fear, but humans learn to harness it. The most important conversation happened with Captain Lee as they approached the fleet's main command ship. Cathara had been thinking about everything witnessed during the mission, trying to understand how it would change the galactic community's view of humanity. "Your people are not what our reports suggested," Cathara admitted. "What did the report say?" Captain Lee asked. "That humans were emotionally unstable, prone to panic, and unreliable in combat situations. That your fear responses made you weak and unpredictable." Captain Lee laughed softly. "Well, we are definitely emotional and sometimes unpredictable. But weak? I think today proved otherwise." "Indeed. But I still do not understand how you function so effectively while carrying such fear." "Maybe that's exactly why we function so effectively," Captain Lee suggested. "Fear tells us when something is important. It makes us fight harder to protect what matters. It brings us together when we face threats." As they docked with the command ship, Cathara realized that writing the mission report would be challenging. How could the Vorthak warrior explain to the Galactic Council that everything they believed about fear and courage was backwards? The other alien soldiers who had been affected by the neurotoxin were already discussing their experiences. The Centauri. Captain spoke of newfound respect for human psychological resilience. The Corvin warriors admitted that they had never understood true courage until they watched humans act effectively while genuinely afraid. "What will you tell your superiors?" Dr. Kim asked as they prepared to disembark. "The truth," Cathara replied, "that humans are not fearless, that they are perhaps the most frightened species in the galaxy, and that this makes them the most effective warriors we have ever encountered." Captain Lee gathered his team for a final debrief session. As Cathara watched the humans discuss their mission, the alien observer noticed something remarkable. They talked about their fears openly, shared concerns about decisions they had made, and supported each other through the emotional aftermath of combat. This was completely different from Vorthak military culture, where showing weakness or uncertainty was considered shameful. The humans seemed to view fear as simply another piece of equipment to be maintained and used properly. Observer Private Choi Wan approached as the meeting ended. "I wanted to thank you for asking about my nervousness yesterday. Talking about it helped me understand that being scared was normal." "You taught me something important as well," Cathara replied. "You showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but effective action despite fear." As Cathara prepared to return to the Vorthak fleet and write the mission report, one final realization struck home. The humans had not just completed an impossible mission, they had redefined what courage actually meant. They had shown that true strength came not from feeling no fear, but from feeling fear and choosing to protect others anyway. They had demonstrated that the most effective military force was not the one that eliminated emotions, but the one that learned to use emotions as tools. Most importantly, they had proven that sometimes the species that seemed weakest on paper could be the strongest when it really mattered. In the depths of the Hive-Mar stronghold, surrounded by deadly enemies and biochemical weapons, Cathara had learned fear's true meaning. It was not weakness to be eliminated, but strength to be embraced. and the humans had mastered that strength like no other species in the galaxy. The mission report would be interesting to write.